Hello, my name is Charles Lincoln. I'll be presenting the Kirkhart-Morris case in relation to the Wine v. Maryland case, but this is based off the European Court of Justice case and in regards to broader policy implications for dentist waivers, Advanced European Union tax law class. Now, let's get straight into the facts of the matter. The facts of the matter are that a couple lived in Belgium, and in 1995 and 1996, they received dividends from a French company. The French withholding tax on dividends was 15%. Belgium did not apply the credit system for any of the taxes paid on the French withholding tax, and Belgium dividends were taxed at 25% on the corporate level without any double tax relief. Thus, they paid more taxes than dividends coming from the Belgian company. Now, if we look at this chart up above, we see that the gross dividends paid domestic situation and what it was compared to the French withholding tax. So, on the domestic, you have the gross dividend 1,000, income basis is 1,000. 25% of that is 250. You have a tax assessment of 250, and your net dividend is 750. On the other side, we see the French dividend withholding tax going to 150, and then that being the 850, and then we have the Belgium assessment on that 850. For the income tax basis in Belgium being 212, and then you have the tax burden in Belgium being 212 plus the 150, and then that leaves you only with a 362 tax basis. Now, the procedural posture of the case is that the Wines took it up the Belgian Supreme Court, and then they went up to the highest court in Belgium, and the court requested a preliminary hearing for the European Court of Justice to determine whether or not the imposition of double taxation violated Article 53 of the treaty, prohibiting restriction resulting from state income tax. So the Commission viewed that the ECJ should not force Belgium to give a tax credit because it would be a violation of the EU fundamental freedoms. Now, the Advocate General's opinion in the case was that juridical double taxation was quasi-restriction and thus may only be eliminated through intervention of the community legislature. The ECJ followed this opinion and stated that the EU treaty freedoms do not preclude a member state from parallel exercising of taxing jurisdiction, even if it leads to double taxation, as long as neither state treats the cross-border situation less favorably than the comparable purely domestic situation, and that this was not a restriction on the free movement of capital. Now, the Teravatel book points out that the comparability analysis was key in determining this case because the assumption of taxing jurisdiction is national sovereignty, but to the exercise of jurisdiction assumed the court scrutiny. They appreciate the balancing the interests of the internal market with the legitimate interests of member states, and they have this French quote here from Montesquieu that states, the court shouldn't be ruling from the bench. The court should not be legislating from the bench. Now, let's compare that is the Kirkhart-Morris case. Now let's compare that to a case from the United States that came out in 2015, Wine versus Maryland. Basically, the Wine versus Maryland case had very similar facts, and it essentially stated if this had happened in the United States, it would not be constitutional, and it would be in construed violation of the United States Constitution, Commerce Clause, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, that states the Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations among the several states and with the Indian tribes. Now, let's look at the facts of the case. First, the tax system, there was a two-tiered tax system in Maryland. There's a state-level tax that does provide credit for foreign tax paid abroad. Foreign tax paid abroad. On the county level, does not provide credits. So, the facts were that the Wines were residents of Maryland receiving dividends from Utah. There was double taxation on the county level. Of course, there was a double tax relief on the state level, but the county level provided no credit for taxes paid in Utah. And the question that the Wines had to the court was, and that they pulled up on appeal, is this a duplicative state-level taxation in violation of the Dormant Commerce Clause? Now, in the majority opinion, Justice Alito stated that to survive Commerce Clause scrutiny, Maryland needed to be internally consistent, and thus needed to survive Dormant Commerce Clause. Now, you need to survive this two-pronged test. It needs to be internally consistent, and the internal consistency needs to you need to examine the court system, the tax system as a whole. Now, the internal consistency had been used 7 times since the 1930s in Supreme Court cases, so there was sufficient precedent. Would interstate and intrastate commerce be taxed equally if every state were to adopt a precise scheme of the issue? The Maryland case failed because the court reasoned that it was unfavorable if every other state started adopting this message, this scheme, tax scheme. It would act as a tariff and discriminate against interstate commerce, i.e., the internal market of the United States. Interstate commerce would be violated. So often there were open questions after the wine case because it was not clear whether they should use a credit system to solve the problem or stop or give a fundamental change and just rely strictly on a territorial system for taxation, because that wouldn't lead to double taxation. The court did not answer that question. Now, Maryland could eliminate all the credits it affords to residents. Okay, yeah. And final thoughts, the court again did not legislate from the bench as the Taravattel book indicated, but it is key to appreciate that maybe it's that these types of changes need to come through the legislature. So, should Europe adopt a internal consistency test? A few thoughts. The Commission's ideas uses treaties to determine what state has to relieve double taxation. And then this would allow the European Community Legislature to create a European framework. Or you could have a New Deal, such as we had in the United States, that ended up leading to this type of analysis in the 1930s. And also, CCTV could be a solution for these types of issues. And thank you very much for your time. So the final question is, should there be a New Deal for Europe? Thank you very much for your time.